Hey Gianni, how you doing, man? You okay?
Good, man. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. All good.
No worries at all. It's my pleasure. Obviously, I want to talk about the upcoming sort of like big event you've got now, EBI 25, because
hmm
one of the more interesting things I think will be your sort of like approach to it from your sort of like training background at the moment. But before we talk about that, I just want to ask about your sort of like journey through the sport because you've had an insanely long career already, you know what I mean? And you're not even that old, really. So
Yeah, yeah,
when
yeah.
you look back to your like early journey through the belt ranks, you know, before you actually hit the big time kind of thing, what was it that really sort of like made you go all in on jiu-jitsu instead of some of the other sports that you were doing at the time?
It's hard to say because it was so long ago. We're talking about, I think I've been in the sport now 23 years. I'm 33 now. I started when I was 10. So it's kind of hard to at this point to really pinpoint one thing exactly. Um, the fun story though is that I always go back to the first time I went out to Worlds out in Brazil. I went on like a little family vacation at the same time the World Championship was going on out there. So I got to be present to watch the Worlds out there in 2004, and I got to see Hydra and Jacare compete against each other. And to me, that was like such an iconic moment in jiu-jitsu, and for me to be there and to kind of see that energy in the crowd, that definitely like made me want to make the sport like my life at that point. And I was only like 12 years old at the time, and I kind of knew at that point, like, this is what I want to do. Um, so I always say that's the story. I think it is, but I don't know. I'm sure over time as I grew up, I just grew more in love with the sport, just the more I kept myself involved.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think for most people, it's like a gradual process rather than like a penny dropping kind of moment. And
Yeah, I
then
always like this. I always like this. I always like to say that story though. Everyone likes that one.
and then it's quite interesting as well. Was that your first time seeing Worlds live in the stands kind of thing?
Yeah, yeah. It was those were the only two guys I knew at that time. Obviously, I was very young. Like Marcelo Garcia was competing, Teddy was competing, all these insane guys were competing. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know who Marcelo Garcia was at that time. I just remember knowing Hadra and Jacare. Those were the only two guys I knew. I remember the rest of the event was amazing as well. I just thought the like I said, the energy was kind of what did it for me. I hardly remember the jiu-jitsu itself, to be honest. But just that environment, really sucked me in from there.
That's cool because, like I said, that was over 20 years ago now, and I mean the sport's grown leaps and bounds since then. And obviously, you've had a sort of like ringside seat for all of it, you know.
Yeah.
And has it been a bit sort of crazy taking that journey into, being an elite competitor and then noticing that the stage around you is so much bigger than it was even back then, you know?
Yeah, I grew up in a very interesting time in the sport where I've been fortunate enough to be around through both the early stages where there was no money at all, where you couldn't survive being in the sport, to what it is today, where obviously there's still always room to grow, but there's now a plethora of opportunities to, make a living for yourself purely as a competitor if you want. And I'm lucky to have been able to see that progress all the way through. I wasn't just in the beginning, and I'm not just coming in at where it is now. I've kind of been, I kind of came in at like a sweet spot where I really got to see an incredible amount of progress over the last 20 something years now.
Yeah, and I mean, you were, I think, a big part of the sort of like revolution at one point, obviously with Berimbolos and that sort of thing, you know what I mean, when you
Mhm.
first sort of like hit the highest level. And how was that sort of experience as well, like coming up through and, like I said, hitting like a moment in time where something you were doing was kind of revolutionary, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that was cool. Yeah, what do I have to say about that? I'm not sure, to be honest. Uh, yeah, I grew up in the color belts watching like Cobrinha and the Mendes brothers, and I kind of wanted to emulate them because they were successful in my weight class. So I was gravitating towards what they do best. Now, what I will say is it got me, kind of focusing on a particular game and trying to be like certain people could only take you so far. I feel like I was successful at the color belts and early on at black belt because I tried to mimic certain guys. But to be able to get over the top at the black belt, you have to be yourself. You can't just try to copy what other people do because it's never going to come out the same. You need to focus on trying to do what's best for you and just try to be yourself and not try to be like anyone else. And so what I'll say is that helped me, looking up to guys and doing barambolos and trying to emulate certain styles. But after a while, you kind of got to take matters into your own hands and kind of create a blend that works well for you. So what I say is, I always tell people, it's like I got to a certain point doing one thing, and then I had to change it up and really be myself to take it to the next level at black belt.
Yeah, I mean, you've definitely the looking at you competing today to when I sort of like I actually started the sport around about the time you'd have been like a purple belt, brown belt, I think. So
Yeah.
when I was like getting into competition was when you were like hitting the higher level, you know what I mean? So from my perspective, like seeing you through those years, your difference in the way you roll today to back then is like night and day. Has that been like a very conscious process then, or is it just sort of like naturally adding things to your game and taking things out, that sort of thing?
I think it's just natural. You know, you see things that work and don't work in training, and I think one thing that's been important for me to be sustainable in the sport is that you have to be adjustable. You know, I see guys, peak and then peter out over time because they're so unwilling to change what they know best. You know, and I think if I stuck with what I knew best and just tried to live and die with Barambolos until the day I died, then I probably wouldn't still be active and getting a lot of opportunities to compete at highest levels. You know, I don't think I would be as successful. So I know I always need to change my approach. I need to make adjustments. You can't be, regardless of what your results are, even if you're at a high, you can't be satisfied with what you already know and what you're good at because people are always going to be adjusting to your game and you just can't expect it to carry on for too long. You need to be willing to evolve with the times.
So, like I said, you've had like a crazy long career. You know, the longevity you've had is insane compared to, especially at your weight class. You know what I mean? It's crazy for guys to be at the highest level for well over a decade. You know what I mean? It's not
Hmm.
that common. So, is that a big part of it? You think like that adapting your game plan over the years?
Yeah, I think so. And also, honestly, like I've just I think there's a lot of guys who just, after a while they get tired of competing. You know, that they're willing to move on to other things. And that's fine. You know, people are willing to do what they want. I'm competitive by nature, almost to a psychotic level. And it's something that I really enjoy doing. I have a big passion for. And it's evolved to where like I felt like I wanted to prove myself as the young guy, and now it's like a matter of wanting to prove myself as the guy who's been around for a long time and showing that I can still do it and I can win at the highest level. So I'm just a very naturally motivated and competitive person. So that's always kept me hungry, So like I said, I think I've just been able to stick around for a long time. One, because of being able to evolve and adjust my game, but two, it's because I'm very, very, very passionate about it.
So, if you don't mind me asking, then when you look to the future, obviously there is a time for everyone when the body gives out, that sort of thing, and you have to take a step back. When that time sort of like eventually comes for you, do you think you would still sort of compete in like masters divisions, that kind of thing? Like,
Mhm.
because some guys they hit that level where they're like, oh, I can't compete at the highest level, I'll just call it a day. And other guys, you see them out there at masters five, 50 years old, that kind of thing. Do you reckon that'll be you in the future?
Yeah, I don't. It's hard for me to say because I thought I was going to be done competing a long time ago, to be honest, and I'm still here. You know, I really thought I was going to be focusing on other things at this point, but I don't see myself being like a Masters 5 kind of guy, to be honest. I really don't. I do believe I will have a certain point where I want to focus more of my energy on my students. I do notice that if I were to have my own gym right now and I still wanted to compete, I would be struggling a lot because I have a hard time getting ready for competition without kind of being selfish at the same time, about my training. Um, so I think I would compete here and there for fun, maybe to like motivate my students and stuff like that, but I wouldn't want to take it overly seriously. I would just kind of want to stay active because for the enjoyment of it, I believe. But who knows? I could be totally wrong about that. Um, yeah, I don't know when that's going to be, to be honest. It could be 2, 3 years. It could be another 10 years. It all depends on how I'm feeling as time goes by, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. And I mean, I think that's something that's been interesting watching you over the last couple of years when you mentioned like coaching and that sort of thing is that you're probably but I would say probably the most popular or most well-known guy that's taken that turn into ecological training and focusing your
Mhm.
time rather than on drilling on constraint space games, that sort of thing. So can I ask when you made that kind of switch, from my perspective, it seems like it was maybe like a
Mhm.
year or two ago. Was
Yeah.
what was it that sort of like motivated that at the time then?
Yeah. It's funny because I was obviously, as most people know, I was like a huge driller, huge. Like I picked that up from the Menace brothers in Cobrini as well. Like they ingrained it in me every time I visited them, and I was all about it. For a large portion of my career. Um, and it's just one of those things where, like, sometimes you go through a little phase and you feel like you're kind of like hit a certain peak, and it's just nothing's really like changing, and you're like, all right, well, what can I do differently? And I even when I was even when my friend Kivan, who owns Bodega Jiu-Jitsu, when he first like came up to me about trying to approach this style of training, at first I was like very hesitant, just because when you're used to something for so long, it's hard to change. But I didn't say no to it either. I'm like, all right, let's put ourselves through these games. Let's see how I feel doing it for X amount of time. And I remember just walking away through after a number of practices feeling like, man, I feel like I picked up so many things that I wouldn't have thought of if I was just going through drilling and through non-resistant repetition. For me, like you'd have to ask someone like Greg Chatters or Kevon. They're much more eloquent in explaining it. All I could say is that I just remember like going through certain games where it was a situation where I just would feel really lousy going in, like inadequate because I didn't spend enough time going over it in drilling or technique or whatever it may be. But just putting myself through resistance training for 10 minutes or so in a certain spot, I walked away with like, oh wow, I have a number of different options here that I never thought of just through live, constant trying and failing and succeeding. I found that to be it was pretty eye opening those first few weeks, and then I was like, all right, screw it, and stick with it. And I really do enjoy the process. And also one last thing about it is just that like as you get older, you don't want to spend so many hours on the mat. Drilling required me to be on the mat all day. I was on the mat all day for a while, like an average of 5 to 6 hours. Whereas I feel like the CLA approach, you can't be on the mat 6 hours a day or else you're going to die, because it's all live work. So I do appreciate my 2, 3 hours a day. It's very efficient and time well spent.
So can I ask then, because like I said, you've got that experience of sort of coming from one complete direction into the other. And I think it's kind of one of the hot topics at the moment where some people are sort of like Greg Siders, where he's all in, he thinks from day one, constraints led approach, that's how you should approach it. And then other people are kind of back and forth, a bit of a mix. When you think to the future about you, sort of like setting up a gym, coaching students, do you think you'll take a constraints led approach from day one, or will you still sort of drill the way through for beginners kind of thing?
That's a great question. It's something that I'm like kind of putting off because I'm not 100% sure. I don't I'm friendly with Greg Souders. Kevon's one of my best friends, so I hate to piss them off and tell them I'm doing technique. You know, it's I really do believe right now at this moment I would make it like full CLA practices. The thing that I would want to do though, and that might involve or like get into technique is like I would want to put everyone through games situations, but I always want to make sure that I'm giving them my 2 cents, I'm giving them options. I'm not just gonna, the funny memes you see these days is like, oh, figure it out, figure it out. You're not giving any answers. I want to give some answers, or I at least want to be able to like give insight onto what I would do from there. I don't want them to think that they have to do one linear option from a certain situation, but I'll be like, I'll put them through a game. This is usually what I do in my practices. I'll put them, my practices at Bodega are a little bit more informative, I feel. I'll put them through a game. And then if I see something that I just feel like is going wrong, I'll be like, okay, guys, I'm not telling you exactly what to do, but here's what I would try to do. Here's an option that maybe you could take from here and see if they apply it or not. So I do want it to be like a little bit of figure it out, but also kind of give them a few linear paths that maybe they can try to gravitate towards if they choose.
Yeah, I think personally, I think that makes sense. That's something that's where I kind of like fall in debate is that I think that guided practice a little bit does help where, if it might take a new person a couple of days to figure something out, whereas if you can just sort of nip that in the bud and help speed them up a little bit with the live work element where they're able to, try it out and see if it works for themselves, then I
Yeah.
think that kind of like speeds it up from both angles.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I get it.
And then, like I said, obviously you've got EBI 25 coming up now. And I think Is this your first time doing EBI rules? I know it's your first time at EBI,
So
the event, isn't it?
it's my first time doing EBI. It's not my first time doing EBI rule set. There was an event a couple years back that was actually really cool in Jersey, Emerald City Invitational. And I was able to win the first time I did. I lost the second time. But the first one was stacked because I fought, that's where I did the Rippo. I did the leg lock in my first match. And then I fought Raul Rosas, who's a big UFC fighter now. And then I fought Damon Anderson and Kennedy Maciel. So it was actually a pretty good bracket that I had. Yeah. So yeah, I've dabbled. I've dabbled a little bit.
And can I ask then before we go on to the topic, because I do remember obviously the heel hook on Ellis Karadag, I think
Hmm.
it was.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Obviously you got a fair bit of like heat for that at the time as well. But are
yeah.
you one of those people that subscribes to the fact that when I spoke to off the back of that event, I spoke to a couple of like competitors to build an article for the website where basically we were getting people's thoughts on not just that specific incident, but essentially just the idea of finishing something as quick as you can in order to get the win. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I think it surprised a lot of people that a lot of like top tier competitors share the mindset that at the end of the day, if you give someone more chance than you need to, a lot of people aren't going to use that time to tap. They're going to use that time to escape. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
do you fall in line with the same sort of mindset then?
That is fair. I think that is a fair assessment. To be honest though, just like kind of with that submission, like I didn't realize how hard it was until I looked at it afterwards. I really genuinely had like no idea how bad it looked until until I went back and looked at it. I was like, holy shit, you are a scumbag. I really did not. His foot was literally just there. And I saw the opportunity. And the only way to get a finish like that was to have a quick motion rotating. Um, yeah, I felt terrible when I saw that, to be honest. And I remember everyone looking at me like I just murdered someone after the submission. And I'm like, what? What are you guys looking at? What? I don't get it. You know, and then I went to the back and I remember like someone posted a highlight or a clip of it already by the time I got back there. And I was like, oh shit, I get it now. Yeah. So I knew I was in trouble as soon as that happened. But I mean, obviously I genuinely didn't mean for it to be that malicious, but I can understand where both sides come from to an extent there. It didn't look great. I know that's for sure.
No, that's fair enough. And it's nice to hear that you've had sort of like time to reflect on it as well. Obviously, it's been a little while now. And
Yeah,
you mentioned,
I felt bad about it. I mean, the one thing I didn't like was that I think the kid created a narrative that like I didn't care. I think he said so. I don't know. I forget. I didn't really read into it too much, but that's what I was hearing. People were saying he was saying. I remember always approaching him and being like, "Man, are you all right? You know, I'm so sorry about that. I apologize." So I wanted to make it clear that it was not. Uh, there was no like bad intent. It was just the situation. The position itself was. It was hard to do anything slow in that moment.
yeah, absolutely. Because in fairness to you, I think from memory, you were stood up when the heel got exposed. And as you went for it, you sort of not fell
I
back,
just.
but like, yeah, like went into the heel hook and such. You know what I mean? So
Hmm. Hmm.
I think a lot of people maybe personally weren't giving you enough leeway in that sense that when you did go for it, the only direction you can go is kind of like with gravity, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah. It is what it is.
Yeah, and like I said, yeah, that was your. You said you've had two times competing under EBI rules now, but not a lot of those matches went to EBI overtime, though, did they?
Uh, mm, no, actually, a good majority did. I believe. I think 4 of the 5 year, 6 matches I had, did actually go to overtime. So I've had plenty of experience with the overtime rules. I think I won 4 of them and I lost one of them. I fought Kieran Kichuk, Kichuk, really good leg hocker guy. I fought him and won, and he won one of the overtimes. But besides that, mostly on the positive side, thankfully.
Nice. I didn't realize actually, and like I said, when you look for EBI, then coming at it from like a constraints-based approach, have you? I think it's kind of like already taken that approach in the sense that that is a miniature game in itself, just trying to finish from the back while the other person escapes. So have you been doing a lot of those rounds like leading up to EBI now then?
I haven't really like stepped it up any more than I usually have, to be honest. We usually do a lot of backgrounds anyway. At the end of the day, it's just like having good submissions from the back and being able to defend the back. And I feel like we do that a pretty fair amount, like just through regular practices. Like I even told Keeban, I'm like, hey man, I might be coming in and just asking you if I can just do more of the live rounds starting from the back. And without even really adjusting my practice to anybody else's, like a lot of our games were starting from there already. So I'm like, oh, perfect. This is exactly what I need to work on anyway. Um, so yeah, it's just something that we always kind of work on. There's always like, we have like standing, passing, hitting, hitting and like submission games. And usually the submission games, a lot of time will be like back control and stuff like that. And then obviously on the flip side, always just looking to defend.
Fair enough, fair enough. And then obviously what I think is one of the more sort of like interesting storylines coming into EBI is the fact that both you and Max Hanson are in the bracket. Obviously, you had that who's number one match recently.
Hmm.
The decision didn't go your way in the end, but it was probably I think it was probably the closest match of the night, really, in terms of not knowing which way the judges were going to go necessarily each time they were reading the judges' favor element of it. So can I ask, how did you feel sort of like looking back on that match? Did you think there was things that you could have maybe done differently just to edge it in your favor, or?
I mean, sure. At the end of the day, and like, I never talk about rush decisions because I always feel like there's always something I could have controlled better, where I could have taken matters into my own hands. Like, why did it get there? Why did I allow it to get there? I feel like I've been on the short end of some really questionable refs decisions before, but first things first, I always have to look and see like how I could have been better, right? And one, I felt like I was off balancing a lot in the beginning of the match, but I wasn't really opening up the way I wanted to. And at the end of the match, I felt like I was negating a lot of his guard and attacks from there, but not able to push forward the way I should have. I was kind of being a little bit more reactionary and wanting to try to get a pass more off of his entanglements, which just makes me feel like I could have done more at the same time. I will say at the end of the day, I do believe I got that decision, or I should have. Um, but at the end of the day, there was a lot more that I could have done better. So that's always what I'm looking at first.
I think that's a good way to look at it, to be fair. And like I said, you'll have potentially the chance of revenge, obviously. Um, is he one of the people you're sort of like looking forward to facing then if you do end up getting drawn in one of the earlier rounds?
I would love that. I really do feel like our games match up well for myself. I feel good about that matchup. But there's so many guys in the bracket too. Like it's really hard to look at just one person. You know, Keith is another guy that's super good. I've lost to him once. So that's another match I would like to have back. Ethan Tenliston is super good. I know there's a lot of guys that are like maybe, quote unquote lower on the seating, but it's solid top to bottom from what I could tell. There's absolutely no gimmies. So for me to look at just one or two people would be a mistake because I feel like the whole bracket is legit, super legit.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I would say personally, probably five or six guys that you would see winning the bracket, like pretty, not easily, obviously, but do you know what I mean? Five or six guys that you wouldn't be surprised if they won it, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, and then obviously, I think a big thing for attracting that many sort of like top competitors to EBI is the fact that it's been switched back from combat jiu-jitsu to traditional sort of EBI rules.
Yeah.
You've never done combat jiu-jitsu though, have you?
No, no. And I will say like when I'm not sure if it's Eddie or whoever it is on his Instagram that messaged me initially inviting me. They like they pretty much made it clear with me. It's like it's not combat jiu-jitsu. I'm like, I'm in. You know, I'm in. And the combat jiu-jitsu thing, I'm like, but if it's just pure jiu-jitsu, that's cool with me.
Nice, nice. And then obviously, if your sort of like more recent performance just before who's number one was at that AIGA event as well, which was pretty crazy. I think it's only like the second or third time they've done it, and there was a massive stadium, sort of arena area, and so many good guys on a bunch of different teams as well. How did you find
Mhm.
that kind of like team element coming into that event as well?
I had zero expectation for it. I remember I was kind of torn because I was on the UFC show initially. And if you made it to the final of the UFC show, obviously, I think it was the same weekend as AIGA. So I was like, oh, if I get to the final, I don't have to go to Kazakhstan, which honestly, I did not want to go to Kazakhstan. I really did not want to. I'll be totally honest. It just, anything that ends in stan kind of scares me a little bit, you know? I didn't want to go. And I remember like my punishment, I felt when I lost my match at the OC show, was like, well, fuck, now I got to go to Kazakhstan, you know? And it ended up being such a blessing because we had such a cool team with Allion, and everyone was super cool. The managers, the everyone on the team, the nutritionists, the cooks, everyone that was involved, all really good people. And competing in like a real team style event, which was the first time, I think the first time for me, that was like the most fun experience I really ever had. It brought a different energy to when you competed. I watch my matches and I look at myself and I feel like I could just look at myself and like, oh, you have a different energy about you, you know, in those matches. And it's because I knew I just wasn't fighting for myself, but I was fighting for my teammates as well. So I was like extra fired up out there. And overall, yeah, it was a really nice experience, really cool experience.
Would you want to do like team style competitions again then in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure how I feel about like quintet style. Like I didn't, obviously it's hit or miss, like CJI. I don't know if I like the quintet style where like different weight classes could fight each other. Um, for example, I felt really bad for, you know, Dante Leon probably trained months for CJI. And then the one match that he has, and I know it's luck of the draw, it's just kind of how it is, but the one match he got to have was him last man standing, having to submit Victor Hugo to keep his team alive. Like, what a fucking ask, you know? What a task that is. It's like, man, can we at least get this guy someone like within his own weight class so it's a little bit more of a, you know, a little bit more competitively fair. I don't know why we can't do like just 5-on-5 and each guy fights their own weight class. I get where they're coming from. And I would be down for team events if it's like 5-on-5 or 7-on-7 like we had at AIGA. But the whole mixing of weight classes thing kind of, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it, especially when you're in your 30s. You don't need to be fighting guys that are 100 pounds heavier than you.
Well, yeah, I mean, to be fair, the whole like absolute element of quintet that does kind of give guys in your weight class and even like 77, maybe even 88 kilo guys, you do kind of get the short straw because there's
Mhm.
there's no one, especially you, obviously at 66, there's no one lighter than you in the division, really.
Yeah, that's it. You know, you got 1 in 5 chance of fighting someone in your own weight class, you know, so doesn't always happen.
And then when we mentioned like the ADCC weight classes that they use for CJI, obviously you've had a couple of ADCC appearances in the past, and I know the last couple of years you've had like deep runs at trials as well. Are you looking to go back to trials this year and next year now, or are you not
Yeah.
decided yet?
No, no, I'll definitely be there. You know, I don't know. I don't know when to chill out. You know, I always, as I get older, I feel like I'm just improving. So I feel no reason to not do them. You know, this, of course, this will be at a time where like, where I'll finally qualify. I'll finally win a trial at 80 for ADCC. And then, it's not in Vegas this time. It'll be in Poland. You know, that's just my luck. Yeah. I'm sure Poland's great, by the way, but, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and you are right. I mean, I don't even think how many times you've done trials now, but you're always like right at the end of the division. Do you know what I mean? You're always making that deep run and
Yeah.
going quite far.
I
And
mean, sorry, trying to cut you off.
it's all
Yeah,
right.
the last run was tough because I was getting to the quarterfinals every time, and this was kind of a tough situation. I think I got the quarterfinals each time, and I lost to Dorian on the East Coast trials, and I lost to DeAndre on the West Coast trials, and they were both like right before the medal round, so it made it very hard to um, really warrant an invite. You know, where I was like, okay, I lost to the best guy, and they were both close matches. But just because it was the quarterfinal, I felt like, you know, guys who were taking second, third were getting, you know, first dibs at invites. So hopefully one, I could just win it straight up, but hopefully two, maybe the brackets will work in my favor just in case it doesn't go the way I want.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the tricky things about the sort of additional invites in ADCC is you're right, they always tend to go to the podium placement at the very least, or maybe fourth place sometimes.
Yeah,
Um,
fair.
so when you're looking at like ADCC in the future, then do you think there's anything that you could maybe change about your game or like add to it to sort of help you succeed under that kind of unique rule set?
Yeah, I need to be better at wrestling. That's the biggest thing. You know, I need that. And not that I even have to be like a D1 style wrestler. I don't need to be a Dorian. I just need to be like, and I do feel this when I train. It's just a matter of applying it into competition, but it's just being like comfortable more on my feet. And we've been applying a lot of games and situations in training. just from the feet these days, for the last like month or so now to get ready for trials. Like I said, I don't need to have the best wrestling. I need to have the best anti-wrestling or good anti-wrestling, to succeed. How can I, blend the stand-up into the ground? So that's kind of what we've been working on. And hopefully I can apply that. I think trials are in November, so got a little bit of time to work with.
And if you don't mind me asking, then when you talk about sort of like structuring games to help you develop like anti-wrestling sort of thing, what does that kind of look like then?
It's just so like just dealing with guys who take shots on you and being able to work it into front headlocks, working into or stuff like that, trying to find submissions or getting it to the ground safely where I can start getting into dominant spots as well. Not expecting to blast double, Ethan or Dorian or guys like that. But just looking to, either get safely to the ground without being scored on or being able to use their wrestling against them.
So if you don't mind me asking, then with EBI coming up, and obviously there's no points in play, no sort of like risk in that side of it, do you think we'll see you standing up a little bit more and trying to wrestle with the guys in EBI then?
I'll probably be sitting to my ass, to be honest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't blame you, to be fair.
Maybe in some other events, maybe like I know I'll be doing nogi pans. That would be a good opportunity to, try to work on my feet a little bit more. And there'll be some, maybe another small thing here and there. But yeah, that's mainly that'll be the time for it. In these matches, I would just like to get myself into the best position to try to submit as soon as possible.
Yeah, to be fair, I think with the EBI in particular and other events where they structure like 4 matches in a single day, a lot of the time the guy that wins the final isn't necessarily better than his opponent in the final. A lot of the time it's because they've had a quicker run to it, so that they're a lot fresher. And with EBI especially, obviously you've got like grueling overtime rounds sometimes. Guys get like 2 matches in a row where they go to all 3 overtime rounds, and that's exhausting. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I know that feeling. The one that I had, I think I went to 3 overtimes with Damien. I went to 3 overtimes with Kennedy. So it was rough. It was a rough one.
And that's pretty much everything I wanted to go through with you today then, Gianni. Is there anything that you want to say or anyone you want to give a shout out to or anything like that at the moment?
No, I appreciate you having me on. Thank you to my team, Bodega Jiu-Jitsu, my sponsors, Fanlix. Yeah, and EBI 25 out in San Antonio, Texas, can be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Nice. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you,
thanks so
man.
much. Thanks so much for taking the time to speak to me then, and take it easy, all right?
Thanks, dude. Thanks for having me on.
Cheers. Take care.